These are the owners who loaded over £1 billion of debt onto Manchester United, drained more than 150 million in dividends, let Old Trafford rot with leaking roofs and mice infestations, and now, after 21 years, some of them finally want out. On June 3rd, 2026, Bloomberg dropped a bombshell. Several members of the Glazer family have been holding internal discussions about selling their stake in Manchester United. Not just trimming around the edges, not just offloading a few shares, some of them want to divest everything. Let's break down exactly what this means, why it's happening now, and what it could mean for the future of our football club. To understand where we are, you have to understand how we got here. In 2003, an American real estate billionaire named Malcolm Glazer quietly purchased a 3% stake in Manchester United. At the time, most fans barely noticed. Glazer already owned the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the NFL. He was a deal maker, and over the next 2 years, he systematically increased his holdings. The key moment came when he acquired the 28.7% stake held by Cubic Expression, the investment vehicle of Irish racing tycoons John Magnier and J.P. McManus. That single transaction pushed Glazer past the threshold that triggered a mandatory takeover offer. By May 2005, the Glazer family owned 98% of Manchester United. Here's the part that still stings. The total cost of that takeover was roughly £790 million. But the Glazers only invested around £270 million of their own money. The rest, approximately £540 million, was borrowed from 3 New York hedge funds: Citadel, Oxzif Capital Management, and Perry Capital. That debt wasn't secured against the Glazer family's assets. It was secured against Manchester United, the club that had been financially solvent since 1931, completely debt-free before the takeover, was overnight saddled with more than £500 million of debt it never asked for. The interest payments alone were roughly £62 million per year. Every single season, before a ball was kicked, before a transfer was negotiated, before a youth academy player was developed, tens of millions were disappearing to service debt that existed purely because of how the Glazers structured their purchase. And it gets worse. According to football finance journalist Kieran Maguire, Manchester United's total net interest, cost on debt, has now reached a staggering £1.06 billion. Over £1 billion gone. This season alone, the club spent £37 million on these payments. On top of all that, the 6 Glazer siblings who inherited ownership after Malcolm's death in 2014 have collectively pocketed more than £150 million in dividends. Between 2016 and 2020, those dividends exceeded £20 million per year. The Glazers could have paid down the debt themselves. They chose not to. Instead, they let the club's own revenue handle the burden, and to make up the shortfall, they aggressively pursued commercial deals and sponsorships. Revenue did grow from about £166 million in 2005 to over £627 million by 2019. But the question that haunts every United fan is simple: where could that money have gone instead? Because while the revenue climbed, the infrastructure crumbled. Old Trafford, the theatre of dreams, developed leaking roofs. There were reports of mice infestations. While every other top Premier League club invested in modernising their facilities, United Stadium fell into a state of disrepair that embarrassed everyone associated with the club. As Steve Crompton of fan group The 1958 put it, "The club is slowly dying before our eyes, on and off the pitch, and the blame lies squarely at the current ownership model. The club is facing financial Armageddon. The fan anger has been constant." In 2005, the moment the takeover completed, disgruntled supporters created FC United of Manchester, a Phoenix club born out of pure frustration. The green and gold protest movement launched in January 2010. Then came the watershed moment, May 2nd, 2021, when fans stormed Old Trafford and forced the postponement of a Premier League match against Liverpool. It was the first time in history a Premier League fixture had been called off because of a protest. Sir Bobby Charlton himself once said he tried to explain to the Glazers that they couldn't ignore fans who are so emotionally involved in the club. They ignored them anyway. Then came November 2022, when the Glazers finally announced they were open to selling the club. 2 serious bidders emerged: Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the Ineos chairman, and Sheikh Jassim bin Hamad Al Thani, a Qatari banker and son of a former prime minister. For months it felt like salvation might actually arrive, but Sheikh Jassim's bid collapsed. According to SEC documents, his team repeatedly failed to provide customary financing commitment letters, proof of funding. He withdrew in October 2023. Ratcliffe's deal went through in February 2024, but it was only for 27.7% of the club, later increased to 28.94%. He gained control of football operations, but the Glazers retained around 49% ownership with over 2/3 of the voting rights. The Glazers weren't leaving, they were just stepping slightly to the side. And now, here we are, June 2026. Bloomberg reporting that several Glazer family members are studying the possibility of divesting part or all of their holdings. The internal discussions apparently started with individual family members looking to sell their personal stakes, and they're now trying to convince the others to join them. Crucially, there's no confirmation that Joel and Avram Glazer, the executive co-chairmen who hold the real power, are on board. The market reacted immediately. United's New York-listed shares jumped 7% in extended trading. The Daily Mirror has reported the Glazers would only consider offers north of £5 billion for their stake. The club's current market cap sits around $3.45 billion, with trailing 12-month revenue of $863 million. So what happens next? There are a few scenarios. Ratcliffe has a first refusal clause if the Glazers decide to sell more shares, meaning Ineos could theoretically buy up enough to take majority control. But there's also a drag-along clause. The Glazers can force Ratcliffe to sell his shares if a new buyer emerges, and there's apparently an incentive tied to the original deal that motivates the Glazers to sell before February 2027. That deadline is now just 8 months away. Wealthy Middle Eastern parties could re-enter the picture. Sovereign wealth funds that missed out on the last cycle might see this as a second chance. The new 100,000-seat stadium designed by Norman Foster, potentially costing £2 billion and targeting a 2030-31 opening, represents a massive investment opportunity, but also a massive liability if the ownership situation isn't resolved. Michael Carrick has just secured a third-place finish and Champions League football. The on-pitch product is improving. The commercial engine still generates enormous revenue. This is still one of the most valuable football clubs on the planet. But the ownership question, the question that has defined the last 2 decades, remains unanswered. 21 years, over $1 billion in interest payments, a crumbling stadium, endless protests, a fan base that has been pushed to the absolute breaking point, and finally, some members of the family that caused all of it are looking for the exit. The real question isn't whether some Glazers want to sell, it's whether all of them will, because anything less than a full sale just means more of the same, more divided ownership, more half measures, more of a football club being treated as a financial instrument rather than what it actually is, the beating heart of millions of people around the world. Watch this space. The next 8 months could change everything. Thank you so much for watching until the very end. Building United Side 90 has been an incredible journey, and I couldn't do it without you guys. To never miss another episode, drop a like and subscribe to the channel right now. And if you have the means and want to back the channel even further, you can support my work by sending a super thanks or becoming an official channel member. It truly makes a massive difference. We stay united until the 99th minute and beyond. See you in the next video.